Welcome to the Hong Kong On Screen podcast, brought to you by Hong Kong On Screen, a Los Angeles-based non-profit organization promoting films and culture of Hong Kong.
Okay, welcome back to Hong Kong On Screen podcast. Today, I'm very happy to have a very honorable guest, Professor Stanley Rosen, who is a professor at USC teaching Chinese politics, and also he himself is a Chinese film industry expert. So today I invited Dr. Rosen. You're here, right?
I am here.
Yeah, okay. Say hi to our listener. Our listener, actually, half of them come from the United States. Half come from Hong Kong and other part of the world.
Mm-hmm.
So that's many people are listening to us. Okay. So in this podcast, we are going to discuss a film called Farewell, My Concubine. And then I think maybe to some Hong Kong people, they will think, oh, 霸王別姬, probably they don't see this as a Hong Kong film. But actually, I see this as a Hong Kong film because we have Leslie Cheung in this film. And then also the story actually is also based on Hong Kong author Lilian Lee, right? Lee Directed. Right. So I totally consider this is a Hong Kong film. But the director, of course, he's not a Hong Konger. He is Chen Kaige, is a very famous fifth generation Chinese film director. Okay, so Dr. Rosen, today I want to I invite you to come to this podcast because I have many questions about the release of this film. I not only in United States but also in China. So let's talk about the release in United States. So right now the film movement, an organization in New York, they are going to re-release this film in theater by the end of September, both in United States and also in Canada. And one of the promotion slogan that they mentioned that is, this is the full version, uncut version. So basically it means 30 years ago when they released in United States is a cut version, right, Dr. Rosen?
It was when Miramax, the Harvey Weinstein company at that time, when Miramax released it on DVD, they had the full version, but the theatrical version was maybe 11 to 14 minutes shorter. I counted over 11 minutes that were cut out, but there may have been actually a few more minutes. It was the truncated version. When Louis Malle, head of the Con jury, saw the American version, he said there were 20 minutes cut out. I don't think there were a full 20 minutes cut out, but there were.
Based on my numbers on the information is 14 minutes.
That's what it said.
157 and
right.
171. So there's two versions.
I counted only about 11 and a half minutes out scene by scene, but there could be more that were missed.
So what kind of thing that they cut actually?
Well, talk about Harvey Weinstein. It's a lot easier now that he's incarcerated for his crimes, but I don't think this would be re-released by Film Movement if Harvey Weinstein was still active. He would make sure that his company did it. But Harvey Weinstein did not get the nickname Harvey Scissorhands after the film Edward Scissorhands. Johnny Depp, Winona Ryder film, for nothing. This was one of many films he cut. He would choose films for Miramax that he thought had a chance to do well in the North American market. And so he did it with Snowpiercer, the Korean film, got into a very public fight with the director over that. He cut much more, at least 22 minutes out of The Grandmaster, the Wong Kar-wai film. And he made it more like a film noir. He had a voiceover. He had English language on the screen when new characters were introduced to try and make it. What he's trying to do is to make it simple and shorter. And I did a paper on this once way back, which I presented at the Beijing Film Academy and also at the Baptist University in Hong Kong on American remakes of East Asian films. And I included a little bit of Harvey Weinstein's role in that. But he was basically saying with Snowpiercer, the Korean film, he's basically saying, hey, I'm not cutting for the fun of it. I'm trying to get the shit to work, is the way he put it. Now, if you're a film director and your film is called shit by Harvey Weinstein, you're not going to be happy. So this is one of many films he cut. And I would say He cut some of the opera scenes, certainly, and he cut some of the politics scenes, too, things which would not be understood by an American audience. And it led to some difficulties and some segues. For example, I'll just give you two examples of two of the maybe longer cuts. So let me give you two.
You still go back to the cut that you mentioned about. They cut the politics. They cut the opera, the Beijing opera scenes.
Yeah. They cut not all of them certainly, but they cut a number of scenes where Beijing opera is being performed, and they cut a number of scenes which had some political implications related to the Cultural Revolution. For example, I can give you two examples of cuts because it relates to the coherence of the film as well. Another one of your questions. We see a scene where the two leading characters are performing for People's Liberation Army troops that have entered Beijing entering in 1949. And after they do this Peking opera performance, the audience, I guess, of PLA troops reciprocates by performing a patriotic song, a Chinese patriotic song. And you see Xiao Si, the orphan that has been adopted by Chen Kaige, the Leslie Cheung character. You see how much he enjoys listening to the patriotic song. And that then segues to him happily skipping through the streets of Beijing. So without that cutting that earlier scene of the Peking opera performance of the PLA troops and the PLA troops singing back, you don't get the motivation for Xiao Si skipping down the street with a very happy smile on his face. The whole point was to show that he has bought in to the communist rhetoric. So that's one example. And he's cutting it because it's Beijing opera. Americans don't understand it anyway.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah. The second scene, and that's the one related to politics, you have, again, Xiao Si. He's in a room with all the gifts that Yuan Shiqing, the godfather of Peking opera, in a sense, that's Guiyou character. He's dressed up a little bit in Peking opera costume. He's got all these gifts in front of him. He's singing the song from Farewell, My Concubine. And you see in the back, Red Guards coming in, or at least the military people in military uniforms coming in. And it looks like they're going to give him some kind of a summons. So he's being arrested, basically, it looks like, as the crackdown of the Cultural Revolution continues. In the book, he's actually put in prison as a gang of 4 followers, Xiao Si. Mm-hmm. So that's the politics stuff. That was one example of politics that was cut. Because again, I assume Harvey Weinstein felt, American audiences, they're not going to understand what that means. It's not immediately, unless you know something about Chinese politics, but perhaps you might not immediately know what it means. So that was cut, but again, it diminishes Weinstein's version because it's an important part of the film to show the Cultural Revolution basically consumed everyone, even the people in favor of it.
But about the actor and actor, like the two key characters, they are men, right? The man-man relationship is not being edited in the U.S. release version, right?
Not as. There are certain scenes that were cut that relate to that, and certain scenes that were cut that relate to the kind of a triangle between Zhu Shen, the Gong Li character, and 2 male characters. So certain scenes were cut, but not overall. You really can't cut that out completely. Mm-hmm. There were some scenes with Yuan Shiqing and Chen Kaige also were cut. That Leslie Cheung and Guiyou characters that were cut too, because they're also singing opera when he goes to Yuan Shiqing's house. So I mean, in many ways, Harvey Weinstein is cutting arbitrarily. He doesn't know what he's cutting because he doesn't really know Chinese politics, I don't think. The shortest scenes that were cut were about 9 seconds. And the longest one I saw was about 2 minutes and 2 seconds, but and I've read some of that online as well. And there may have been some other scenes too that were cut, but he's basically cutting it to make it shorter and making it simple. I would say it's still it's a coherent film, but just it's a diminished film. And it did well in North America for the time. It made $5.2 million at the North American box office, which was good for the time, because that was before the success of all the martial arts films, beginning with Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, that started in December 2000. So from 2001 to 2006, you had a whole series of martial arts films doing, as you know, I'm sure, doing very well at the North American box office. Crouching Tiger made 128 million. So 5 million doesn't sound like much, but at that time, it was actually very good. For comparison, Zhang Yimou's films that were popular in the U.S. from 1991 to 1995. Red Sorghum wasn't released, the 88 film. But after that, Judo, for example, Story of Choju, Shanghai Triad was the last one of those, Razor Red Lantern. Those films made a little bit over $2 million a piece. So this was twice as much for My Concubine.
So you mean among all those fifth generation filmmakers, this one actually is the best in terms of box office?
I would say so. And the reason is you had Harvey Weinstein basically in charge. Now, if you look at other Zhang Yimou films like Hero made $53 million.
That is 2000 already. So it's not in 1990s.
Yeah. That's not a fifth generation film of that era. That's right. Mm-hmm. But Harvey Weinstein behind the film will make it successful. He tried a lot harder for Grandmaster, took out full-page ads. Quentin Tarantino, Samuel L. Jackson say it's a great film. Full-page ads, place like New York Times. And he still only made 6.6 million with the Grandmaster, in spite of all the edits he had done and so on. So 5.2 million is very good for that period of time.
And also this movie probably may be the winner of a Golden Globe, also a help.
Yeah,
yeah, right?
That's right. Well, it had the buzz of all the awards. That's right. Yeah. And Gong Li was already known.
Yes.
A little bit.
Exactly.
Because of Zhang Yimou films.
Okay. So very good. I think you already answered my second question. Does the edited version make sense, right? You said that actually is quite good, right? Even though it's
it's reasonably good. Yeah, because I mean you still have 157 minutes, so it's still going to have a lot of stuff in there.
Okay, so let's talk about the ending of the movie, because it's quite different. I remember when I took your class actually, it's about Chinese film and politics, right? You specially mentioned about the ending compared to the original book is a big change. Actually, it's not related to the US release. It's just the director, Chen Kaige himself. He changed the ending. Yes, okay, you have the book, I know. Okay, the English version.
So I'm not making it up. Okay.
Mm-hmm. So as an American audience, as an American scholar, what do you see? And also as a political scientist, especially Chinese political scientist, what do you see about this ending? Why did the director make that change? And then what do you see about this ending?
Well,
because it's very different.
It is. And you have to start with why the book ends the way it does. Have you read the book?
Because it's a Hong Kong writer. She make it related to Hong Kong, and then also I think that is something to show about the Hong Kong identity. And then that because after Cultural Revolution, there's a large wave of Chinese immigrants. They moved to Hong Kong. Right. I think from the Hong Kong perspective, it made this kind of like connection, and then make the two actors came to Hong Kong, and then like to make Hong Kong as a meeting place for them. I think that's totally makes sense from the Hong Kong people perspective, right? Okay. So it's your turn to talk about the Chinese perspective.
Okay, the Chinese perspective. First of all, we start with the book is 1985 when it came out. And the author makes it very clear in what she said and in the book, it was after the joint declaration of 1984 between the British and between Margaret Thatcher and Deng Xiaoping on the transition to 1997. It was a time, as the last page of the book is very revealing in that regard. It was a time of great uncertainty for the future of Hong Kong when she was finishing writing the book. In fact, the last page of the book mentions the joint declaration signing and the question, how much freedom is Hong Kong going to have in the future? And she makes it very clear that that question is of no interest to Duan Xiaolo, Zhang Fengyi's character in the film. He's gone to Hong Kong from Fuzhou. He's left China, and he's not doing well, to say the least, in Hong Kong. But that interest is that transition is of no interest to Duan Xiaolou. The movie ends with Chen Kaige killing himself. That's Leslie Cheung's character in the role of the concubine Yu Ji in 1977 on an empty stage after, very important, after the Gang of Four had been overthrown. Now, he does the same thing, attempts the same thing in Hong Kong. He's still living in mainland China. Make it very clear that Duan Xiaolou is living in Hong Kong. Chen Kaige is still living. After the Cultural Revolution, Duan Xiaolou was exiled, I think it was the Fujian province, and Chen Kaige ended up in Gansu. They were completely separated in the book. But his opera troupe comes to visit Hong Kong, and in fact, the audiences say, "Why is there such a reputation for this guy? He's not really that good." Of course, he's much older then. Anyway, so the movie ends with Chen Kaige killing himself on an empty stage after the Gang of Four had been overthrown. Well, he attempts the same thing in Hong Kong, but he doesn't kill himself. He just kind of gets some blood on his neck because Duan Xiaolou intervenes, said, "Please, you don't do this," and so on and so forth. So he doesn't kill himself. And then the Chen Kaige character in the book says, I get so caught up in the concubine, as I always do on stage, I've kind of forgotten myself. So at the end of the book, Chen Kaige goes back with his troop to China. Xiaolou has to leave his apartment. He's basically kicked out of his apartment. And he goes to his bathhouse, his favorite bathhouse, the Virtue Pool Bathhouse. And even that name has been changed from Virtue Pool to Finland Baths. And the last line of the book is also very revealing. Last line of the book is, there wasn't even any refuge in virtue anymore. That's the last line of the book, at least in the English version. I assume it's the same, maybe Dao or something, whatever they might say in Chinese, I'm not sure. So in the film, the suggestion is also there's nothing left to live for. The rest of the Gang of Four doesn't really change anything, or it doesn't change the basic problems, that larger problems China is facing. The person, when they go up on an empty stage, the person putting on the lights who recognizes them says, we haven't performed for 11 years and whatever. And the person putting on the lights says, "Oh yeah, it's all because of the Gang of Four." And Duan Xiaolou says very unconvincingly, even to himself, "是的, yeah, 都是四人帮. Yeah, it's all also bad," but he doesn't believe it. And so the ending there makes it very clear, Chen Kaige's ending, that the problems that China faces right after the Cultural Revolution go well beyond the Gang of Four, basically, and the arrest of the Gang of Four. So that ending, I mean, it's also indicative, and you say, why did the film get banned in China? It's the next question, but to give you a hint of an answer, one part of the answer is, why do you kill yourself after the Gang of Four has been overthrown? If you're going to kill yourself, do it like Zhu Xian did while the Cultural Revolution is going on.
Yeah, so he's not supposed to kill himself after the Cultural Revolution, right? After the end of
after the Gang of Four has been arrested, things are going to get much better, right?
So why do you think that this one Chinese filmmaker have this ending, but compared to the original, a Hong Kong writer, we have such a very different perspective, right? The end.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Well, I mean, you have to look at a number of things. Chen Kaige wrote a book called My Life in Times as a Red Guard. He felt very, very regretful over his denunciation of his father, another film director who actually helped with all those opera scenes in the film. And some people said his father really directed the film, but that's another story. In any event, so he was very much impacted by the Cultural Revolution. And he wanted, I think, to show that impact of the Cultural Revolution doesn't just dissipate overnight. It's still there. one thing I haven't talked about, which I think is worth talking about, is the atmosphere in China in 1993. The film came out. Deng Xiaoping had taken that trip to Shenzhen to restart the reform program. After 1989, Liu Se in 1989, June 4th, and the students in Tiananmen Square, and the killing, military crackdown, the killings in Beijing and elsewhere, the conservatives had a good deal of influence in policy. But Deng Xiaoping's trip had a major change in the way things were seen. Jiang Zemin, General Secretary of the party, was basically not kind of hedging his bets. He wasn't listening to Deng Xiaoping at that time, because there are other voices that were even more powerful in that period of time after 1989. And nobody blamed Deng for a mistake publicly, but people felt he trusted, just like Mao Zedong trusted Lin Biao and Liu Shaoqi, he trusted Hu Yaobang and Zhao Ziyang and so on. And so Jiang Zemin reportedly had to make a self-criticism. I think it was March 2000, according to Zhengming magazine in Hong Kong, that I read at the time. I think it was in March 1993, perhaps. Deng Xiaoping's speeches, but once it became clear, he went to Shenzhen, Shanghai, went to Wuhan, I think, that Deng Xiaoping was still in control. Jiang Zemin and other top leaders followed suit. And so that period in 1993 had become relatively open compared to the period right before that. So that Xu Feng, the producer, the famous martial arts actress in the Shaw Brothers films, actually had dinner with her. She gave me a lot of paraphernalia from the My Concubine film and some of the other films she produced. I had picture books and VCDs or DVDs, just a lot of stuff about that. That's another story I can tell you about Xu Feng later. But anyway, here, basically, she was planning to do a film called Life and Death in Shanghai, which was the next project that Chen Kaige was going to direct. And that was about Zheng Lian's book, Zheng Lian's book, very popular in English. I actually did a review of that for the Journal of Asian Studies, I think many years ago, and met her as well. Really sweet woman. More stories I can tell you about her when I was supposed to see her in Washington and gave her the wrong hotel name. But anyway, I won't. She lived in the Watergate in Washington. But that was supposed to be the next film. And if you read the book, you would see that's a film about a Christian who survives the Cultural Revolution because of a belief in Christ. And also, up until the Cultural Revolution, she was the wife of a Shell executive. Up until 1966, she never had to face the masses. She had all these retainers and servants. She lived in a wealthy part of Shanghai at the time. She says in the book, I don't want to interact with the masses. They smell bad. Can you imagine saying that during the Cultural Revolution? Anyway, that was the next project, which I can't imagine could have been made, but certainly after this, it wasn't going to be made. And so that was shelved and never got made. So the atmosphere in 1993 is also very important, I think.
Yeah, I have additional point for that, because during 1993, that was also like the first time the Beijing, to apply for the Olympic Games.
Right.
So they really want to show the international community a kind of like nice image, especially after 1989. They really want to like clean them image. Right. And then also because this film already won the biggest prize, like the highest award in Cannes in that year. So they actually not only allowed this film to make, but they also allowed this film to release in China widely for about 2 weeks. And then, but they stopped it and they withdrew it. And then because they find something issue, and then they, but for the Chinese government, not only the politics is sensitive to them, like the ending you already mentioned, like Dr. Rosen already explained about the ending, they don't like the ending, but also about the man-man relationship. They also want to make it more low profile. Although I think the director, Chen Kaige, already made this man-man relationship quite different from the original book, I think, I feel. If you read the like Lilian Lee's original book. Yes, okay. So I think...
You want to ask me why the film got banned in China?
Yeah, okay, yeah, sure. Okay, so tell us. So finally, it still got banned.
Yeah, I mean, you've already answered some of that question. But, well, obviously, one is the homosexuality aspect. Mm-hmm. I don't think you were there that day, but one of the times I taught my film and politics in China class, I had a visiting delegation from the Odian Shuyuan, Post and Telecommunications University. There were four people, I think, that sat in on the film, plus a lot of Chinese students I invited that day, and in addition to my class. And at the end of the film, one guy from the Post and Telecommunications University got up very lividly and said, "This is ridiculous. There's no homosexuality in China. How can this film be made?" And the other Chinese students, and even some of the other delegation members said, "What are you talking about?" But that gives you an idea of if he got so upset, you can imagine the issue in China. And then, of course, as I've already said, the suicide in 1977. Why commit suicide when things are looking better? That's an insult to Chinese politics, to say the least. And of course, the Cultural Revolution scenes, which are in the book as well. In fact, there are more struggle scenes in the book than in the film. They struggle in Tuan Shaolu's house first, and then it's a public meeting as well, where all the betrayals take place. A very powerful 10-minute scene, 9-10-minute scene. And Chen Kaige, of course, felt really bad about the way he had denounced his father, and apologized to him certainly later. Now, the film was shown. In fact, the film had been approved. The script had been approved. The final version had been approved by the Film Bureau. There was no problem with the film. But after it won the award at Cannes, they had reportedly, they had a meeting at the Politburo, top 25 or so leaders of China, where they watched the film to see what all the fuss was about. Again, reportedly, because very hard to get into these meetings if you're not a member of the Politburo, but reportedly, according to Hong Kong newspapers at least, after that private screening, several members walked out before it was over. They were really upset by the film. And afterwards, several members, at least, don't know how many, objected to the film, openly objected to the film, and demanded that 3 cuts be made to the film. Now, Chen Kaige says, he may not be completely honest because he has his own situation to worry about in China in terms of censorship, but he said he believed the cuts related to politics. Now, politics in China could be anything.
Yes.
Certainly it has to do with the suicide of 1977. That's clearly a political issue, and maybe some of the Cultural Revolution scenes as well. So I think those were the main things that were cut. And as you said, because of the Beijing Olympic vote in 1993, again, Beijing was they were going against Sydney, Australia, as to who will hold the Olympics in the year 2000. Now, this is also an important period for U.S.-China relations because the American Congress voted to ask the International Olympic Committee not to give the Olympics to Beijing because of human rights violations, and that upset a lot of young people in China. I mean, the surveys at the time showed 75% at places like Beijing University, Peking University, strongly objected. 75% objected to the U.S. And U.S. had a good image in China, relatively at that time. Why is the U.S. Congress trying to prevent China from getting the Olympics? No matter what we feel about politics, we love sports and we love China. I was very, very stupid. It's an own goal in football or soccer, or shooting yourself in the foot. Or as Mao said, picking up a rock only to drop it on your own foot. That basically is what it was. And so the vote came and Sydney won 43 votes to 41 votes. So people blame the U.S. They did other things at the time. They stopped the Yinhe ship because they thought it was carrying weapons to Iran. They stopped it and had it towed into Saudi Arabia. They did a number of stupid things back in 1993. What that happens after the end of the Cold War, in effect. The Soviet Union
collapse.
The Berlin Wall comes down. There's this great triumphalism in the U.S. Francis Fukuyama writes a book called The End of History. We have the New World Order coming in with the United States. So it was a very important period of time. But they had to show the film, as you say. Now, some film directors like Lost in Beijing, which was the original title of Liu Yu's film, which ended up Pingguo, because with China getting the Olympics later in 2008, Chinese leadership was afraid that if we have a film called Lost in Beijing, people will feel you can't find your way out around Beijing. It's too difficult. So they had the name changed to main character Apple. But she said, this is a long story, again, something I've written about in the past. She said when they showed the film without approval, because it hadn't been approved yet in China, in Berlin, at a media screening. It wasn't a public screening, that's how she got around it, but a media screening, she said, I hope we don't win an award in Berlin, because if we do, this film is going to be really scrutinized very closely, as happened with My Concubine. And they didn't win an award, as it turned out. So, but the film had become so well known that, and the Olympics coming up, that they felt they had to release it. But they released it with at least 3 cuts, according to Chen Kaige.
I see. Okay. Thank you so much, Dr. Rosen, today to talk to me about the whole story about this film, and also tell us about 1993 is a very important year, not only to China, but also to U.S.-China relationship, and then also to the world order, right? Soviet Union just collapse, and Berlin Wall also just like gone down. So a lot of things going on, but it's related to the film release in not only in U.S., but also in China. So I hope I will talk to you next time, Dr. Rosen. Don't reject me to come to my podcast. I'm happy
to talk on your podcast if I think I have something to contribute. There's some value added.
No, about the co-production, I already asked you for many times, so I wish.
I don't think I know enough about that necessarily. I could say some things, perhaps, some things, but there are some subjects that people other than myself know a lot better than I do.
Okay, but I'm sure next time I will find some other topic. I know that you know much more than all of us, so I will ask you to come again.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good to see you, Catherine.
Good to see you, Dr. Rosen.